Hey guys, how's it going? My name is Arden, and today we're talking about WandaVision's first two episodes. Sorry, I realized I wasn't talking about the whole season, but it really feels like quite the experience. Hang on. My bandwidth, some breathing room there. But overall, it is not what I expected, but in the best way possible. It really impressed me. I it's been over 2 years or something like that since we last saw anything from the world of the MCU. Someone pointed that out to me recently, and I couldn't believe it, but apparently that's the case. Jeffrey Ogaro, thanks for joining us. I feel like I haven't seen you in a while on a stream, so it's great to see you. And yeah, I want to avoid spoilers, at least for the first tiny little bit of the stream. Give people a chance to choose whether or not they want to watch through spoilers or not. But we will get into spoilers eventually because I don't have much of a means to talk about this show without spoiling some things. And I think the best way to go about it is to just dive in like I did. I knew very little. Like, I didn't actually watch the trailers. I think I actually used some of the trailer footage, past videos over the last year or so, but I didn't actually watch the physical trailer. I just edited in the footage and left it at that. So I've only really seen little snippets of it and truly didn't know what to expect. A friend of mine, yesterday in fact, messaged me. Oh no, this was earlier this week, but we were talking about it yesterday. But he asked me if he thought this series was going to either like low key introduce or explore the idea of the comic book storyline House of M, where Wanda Maximoff at first recreates reality so that the mutants rule over the entire Earth, but then that leads to the decimation event, where for almost 2 decades, the X-Men and the mutant race were basically wiped out to just all less than like amount of survivors or surviving mutants. Everyone else that lost their powers completely. Led to a whole thing with Scarlet Witch and her possessing these reality altering powers that we are seeing here in WandaVision. It's fascinating stuff, but. And I told him I didn't really think that's the direction that the MCU is going. I don't really believe that's the storyline or the way Marvel intends to bring the Fantastic Four and the mutant race into the MCU. I feel like people, in some ways, are kind of overcomplicating it. They're adding all these theories to what this show could be, and even going into it, I thought that's probably going to be simpler and much more of an exploration of those two's relationship, fallout of Infinity War and Endgame, as well as just a chance for Wanda and also Vision, as it turns out, to really shine as characters. But I really thought this is going to be Scarlet Witch's story. So far, it's both of their stories, which I actually like. He's not just some pawn in all of this, although it's unclear. Like, there's so many questions going, like, coming out of this show, but it's great. I'd rank it right among a lot of the other weird superhero shows that have cropped up over the last several years, namely Legion and Doom Patrol. In terms of quality, I'd say it's kind of right in league with those. But the cool thing about it is, just like those two shows, each kind of have their own little niche that they explore. WandaVision is also its own little thing and completely different from those two shows in terms of tone and what it's going for. But it is similarly really pushing the envelope in terms of what these live action adaptations can be instead of just sort of a generic action adventure thing. It's really not that. But already I feel like I'm telling you more than I should if you haven't actually seen the show and want to first. So here on out, like if you're watching this video after or right now, is gonna get into spoiler territory, so I would recommend pausing it and watching these first two episodes. I will say before we get into that territory, they are only half an hour long. They are kind of easy to watch and enjoy because of that. They were very quick viewings because of it. It reminds me a lot of Mandalorian, which is very much the same thing. And I actually approve. I was messaging the same friend talking about that, and I feel like a lot of other shows in contemporary television in the world out there, be it on Netflix or cable or elsewhere, are half or like hour long or more or less, like but with between 40 minutes and an hour plus, and often would strongly benefit from being cut down to basically a half hour length, like these shows are. I think The Mandalorian strongly benefits from it, and so far it's pitch perfect for WandaVision. Okay, so with all that being said, we'll probably leave it there for spoiler, like, and get into spoiler territory because my goodness, this show is not what I expected. I expected a lot more of like maybe us getting kind of touching in on surreal bits, but otherwise really just kind of being an MCU style show with some of the that kind of action and adventure like thing that all blockbusters are starting to become at this point, but pared down for a TV show, just like one could expect out of Agents of Shield or Human Show or something like that. I really kind of was expecting it to lean more in that direction, but with cool little nods. Like we saw them, like in the trailer footage that I did see, they had Vision and Wanda in the like in some sort of classic TV sitcom, and I thought that was just going to kind of be a flashing moment as Wanda's altering reality, looking for Vision or something like that, and go on a journey trying to find it. I knew Monica Rambeau and a bunch of other MCU characters are slated to appear, so I figured that is what they were going for. But my God, it's not that at all. It's basically Bewitched and I Love Lucy, just kind of slammed together, and that's the first two episodes with this sinister undertone, almost on the level of like David Lynch, where it's like this creepy thing where you know something's wrong. It's all in black and white with just these little hints of color in the first two episodes in important ways, right up until the end of the second episode, where all of a sudden we jump from a 50s style TV show to a 70s one. And if you're looking at some of the promotional material here, it even kind of gets into that, where what the posters where they're in little bits of uh, TV screens and stuff show some of the characters dressed as 80s characters and stuff like that. So we'll be progressing towards that over the course of the 10 or so episodes this series is. And I think it's just supposed to be a mini series as far as I know. So it's interesting already, but otherwise the show just plays it straight, and I love it so much for this. A lot of it is just these classic kind of sitcom jokes. Like the first episode, the crux of this of the first episode's plot is Vision's boss, who like at work they just push these forms around and he can't figure out what they actually do and how the company makes any money. It's got these weird undercurrents of things not like being real and things not making sense on a logistical level within this universe that exists around them. There's all these weird little creepy hints, but otherwise it's just like, oh no, like we got to prepare this fancy dinner for the boss. And the neighbor, Catherine Hahn, who's brilliant and is in stuff like Parks and Rec and all these other excellent shows, as their neighbor, she brings over all these food. I'm going to talk a bit about her because I have a lot of theories about Catherine Hahn's character, Agnes. But regardless, and then that's pretty much it. But then they all sit down for dinner, and everything they kind of manage to pull it off in spite of many hijinks. At one point, Wanda's trying to cook a turkey, and she snaps her fingers, and it gets burnt, and she's like, "Oh, too much!" She snaps her fingers again, and it turns into a basket of eggs, and it's just like, "Oh, too little." That's like a Bewitched joke, but I laughed at it. It's charming. Elizabeth Olsen is really showing off her range in a way that you like. It's just so much more acting than anything she's been able to do in the entire run of the MCU so far. So it's really refreshing to see, and it's just so different from anything else in the MCU I've seen, and I love it for it. It's not like the best show in the world. I mentioned David Lynch, but it doesn't compare well to something like Twin Peaks: The Return, which I just watched, which is why I was thinking of it. But compared to the rest of the MCU, it's very strong, and compared to television in general, it's very very strong. And I love the cast in general. The boss's wife in the first episode is Kitty, like Eric's mom from that '70s show, and it's just delighted to see her, especially in a situation kind of evoking a classic sitcom. Even though that '70s show was a '90s show, it was still cool. I hope she shows up again because she's funny, and she's got the creepiest moment in the entire episode, because at the end of the first episode the boss starts choking and she's just saying like, stop it, stop it, ha 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 ha, stop it, stop it, and it's just in her performance, and the camera keeps panning to her, and Elizabeth, like, oh sorry, Wanda and Vision are sitting in their chairs just terrified. And that's the part that really reminded me of David Lynch, where nothing specifically scary is necessarily going on screen, but just through a series of events, we've established all these aspects of, uh, like, we've established, we've established these chain of events, I guess I'm trying to say, and circumstances that create just this really creepy moment. And that's the end of the first episode. As Pierre Calio says in, to clarify a little bit, the first episode is very 50s, where it's I Love Lucy. The second episode is more 60s, and they even have a Bewitched styled opening, and like Catherine Hahn is creeping in at the end of the title screen. More on that later. And it starts to get a little more weird. There's a presence of this little helicopter that has this little, I thought it was the sword logo too. That's what people are saying in chat, but I don't know if that's the case. But there's some sort of organization actually watching this happen on a TV screen around all this. That is like the last image we see of the first episode. There's more going on. And then there's little creepy moments that happen throughout the second episode. And Scarlet Witch is kind of like working with other moms, and they're all saying like, for the children. But there are no children in this episode. But they're all like trying to put on this magic show for the children. And then they have a magic show, and there's no kids in the audience. It's little things like that. They don't even really acknowledge it in any way, but it's just creepy. And then at one point in the first episode, they ask like Wanda and Vision, oh, like, do you have any kids? And puts a weird look on her face and says like, no. So I don't know if the twins are going to be a part of all of this going forward, but episode 2 does eventually reveal she is pregnant. So that's interesting. And then the whole world around them transitions into color. So, which is a very Wizard of Oz moment, and just the style of art they use for it. I say all this because I have no idea what's happening. I have no idea where things are going to go, but I really do think this is more of a character story. And at one point, Scarlet Witch is meeting all these moms, one of whom is Monica Rambeau from Captain Marvel. So she's just there, and she becomes friends with Scarlet Witch, and they actually really bond with each other. They seem like more real people than the characters around them, who are more artificial and more beholden to the world. They seem a lot. The head leader of this mom group is a lot more reactive to Wanda and seems to recognize there's something wrong with her, and that her presence here is some sort of anomaly. So, like I said, there's something going on, and she's genuinely terrified of Scarlet Witch. And like Wanda's like, I'm not gonna hurt you, and she's like, yes, you will, kind of thing, which is correct. I feel like, or she's like, yes, you do hurt people. Oh, this is like getting into real Scarlet Witch stuff. And then the radio cuts in, and a voice is saying, like, calling out to Wanda. We don't hear much of it, and she kind of like snaps the radio off. And so then more sitcom-y things happen. Vision swallows a piece of popcorn, so he gets all messed up, basically. And he gets drunk. Essentially, he's not actually drunk, but it's a really funny thing. He swallows the popcorn, then we cut to like Bewitched styled animation that shows the kernel of popcorn falling into his robotic body and jamming onto a bunch of gears, and then he acts all weird and drunk for the magic show. But they managed to pull the magic show off successfully, and everyone enjoys it, for the children. And again, I swear, like, I didn't see any children, and it's just like this weird thing where like Wanda has to keep not acknowledging she doesn't have any kids, and then she's pregnant. Then color happens, and then they hear a noise outside. They run outside, And out from the sewers emerges a dude in a beekeeper suit with that same kind of sword insignia. He turns, sees Wanda, clearly recognizes her, and she kind of not breaking character, but breaking the character she's put on so far as like this housewife that's just in love with Vision and everything's fine. They have no knowledge of how they got to this world and this sitcom like existence, and when they're asked about it they can't remember and start to freak out a little bit. uh, and all of a sudden that facade drops for just a second and she goes no, and like just, or like it's more casual than that, she's just like no, and everything rewinds. It gets that VHS kind of rewindy effect. They go back inside, and oh, actually, that's when the color happens, I should say, and we advance to the next decade. Um, and then we hear the voice broadcast a little bit more, and I looked it up because I wasn't sure. I was like, because okay, I don't know if other people else hear this. I heard that voice, and to me, that was Captain America. I don't know, like I thought Chris Evans was done. I don't know if this is possible. He sounds young, which is not really where we left the character, but a lot of possibilities in that regard. And it could just be me. It's distorted through the radio, so it's hard to tell the voice for sure. But I was listening to it and I was like, I swear that's Chris Evans saying like Wanda, and he's saying Wanda, like who's doing this to you? Like what's happened to you? So clearly something's kind of like attacked her, and so I feel like the arc of this story so far to me is less of Wanda trying to change all of reality to make Vision. I think she already did that, like to restore Vision to life after the events of Infinity War. And then either in the process of doing that or because she did that, she created or attracted Agnes, who I feel is the villain. The way she kind of intrudes, I feel like she's kind of subtly sort of keeping those two boxed in into this little illusionary world. It would be funny because Catherine Hahn's such a great performer and force of energy in the show already. And even just the way she's treated in the title sequence in the Bewitched one in episode 2. She kind of just creeps in at the very end when all the characters are like waving at the end of the title screen. I could be wrong, and I'm just guessing because I really have no idea where this show's going, but I feel like Agnes is some sort of trickster force. I don't think she's Loki per se or anything, but she could very well be. Like, who knows? And that would be very interesting. But regardless, there's something strange about Catherine Hahn, and that character is worth watching. Uh, Punk Face Killa says Aim Beekeeper for sure. Other people were saying Sword. I feel like Aim's much more likely because then it's like, well, what's Sword got to do with this? They deal with aliens mostly, even if we are kind of divorcing them a bit from X-Men for now, because I don't really necessarily think this is House of M or an introduction to like the X-Men or anything like that. However, from what I've heard, Evan Peters is slated to appear in this show, as in the dude who played Quicksilver in the X-Men movies, not the Avengers movies. So, as I told my friend, I have no idea what to expect out of the show. That's still true. I really do think it's more personal, though. I really think this is about Scarlet Witch trying to bring Vision back, and this being some kind of consequence to it, or her just being outright attacked by Agnes, who's using Vision as sort of a weapon of some kind against Wanda for whatever reason we don't know, but maybe to corrupt her or take over her powerful abilities and like body and stuff. Uh, I'm not sure, but there is some sort of malevolence behind all of this. I think that has to do a lot with the way like Scarlet Witch and Vision are acting. But oh boy, Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany are so good in this show too. Like it's strongly recommended. Like from me, just based on their performance, it's so different from the kind of stuff we've been getting out of the MCU. I love it so much. It really speaks volumes to where this next direction of the phase, or I guess we're on, or 5, whatever it is for the MCU. It seemed like, based on the announcements, they were really going to push boundaries, like they already kind of were doing, like near the tail end of Infinity War and that era of the MCU. And it feels like we're taking that even further. Push boundaries. This show is so different from everything else, and I love it for it. Um, I think I've talked before on stream about why I don't really subscribe to Disney Plus because I've looked through their catalog before and not really felt there was enough to justify subscribing it beyond The Mandalorian, and one show isn't enough. I think this show's enough to change that opinion. I really do. This is the show that kind of has brought me into Disney Plus. It's so interesting. Mark Shackman's the creator of it, and I never heard of this guy before, but I looked him up and listen. Look at I'm gonna read some. And these are really just the shows I recognize and have like know something about. Uh, so these are some of the shows he's worked on: Ugly Betty, House MD, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, Everybody Hates Chris, Everwood, 6 Feet Under, Boston Legal, One Tree Hill, Mad Men, Judging Amy, uh, Fargo, Game of Thrones, The Boys, and now WandaVision. No creative project, but I assume he's like, I don't know exactly what he's done in all these other shows, but what a roster! There's no way I haven't seen all those shows, but I've seen some of them and love some of them, and I know there's uh, contentious ones on there like Game of Thrones, but it didn't really say what Game of Thrones era. I assume it's not the final season though, based on his track record with other stuff. But like It's Always Sunny, he's got some real credentials, and he really shows it here. This not only is a great show, just in terms of like just being this weird character work and take on like these two MCU characters, which is just so interesting. But he also knows a lot about TV because I instantly recognize these sitcom things, even though like I am very far in terms of when I was born into the 1950s and stuff. But I watched Bravo growing up and such, and I recognize enough to recognize shows like Bewitched, which I never really have seen a full episode of, I don't think. And just so cool. So I have been not ignoring chat, but I wanted to kind of keep my coherent thoughts together as much as I could, especially because I just watched these episodes. So I haven't really had time to fully process all of this. But broadly speaking, really enjoyed by me. Would thoroughly recommend. MCU fans will enjoy it, but I think you could just show this to someone and they'd be like, oh, what is this? This is weird and interesting. Uh, Punk Face Killer 72 says, I find the show hard to watch. There were times I was interested in what was on screen enough to bring me back and see Wacky World. Oh, I liked it because even just if you take away all the MCU aspects of this and that interesting side of it, I found the comedy of it just funny. And like Paul Bettany acting silly on stage as a magician while Elizabeth Olsen's like, oh no, we're gonna upset all the people out there. Maybe like I'm looking at it from a certain level of irony or something, but I was laughing along with the show when it wanted me to laugh. They kind of used the laugh track ironically, so it's not really uh, supposed to be like the parts where you laugh at, but there's just something charming about the show that really won me over and held my interest from start to finish. Again, that's where at the beginning of this review I said it's helped by having only half-hour episodes, because I think if it stretched it out to these 42-minute things, it wouldn't work. It works as like these little things where we're evoking old sitcom shows while also kind of opening up this mystery that clearly has answers. I assume it's all planned out, and whatever's going on with it's got to be AIM, right? It's interesting. Punkface Killer also agrees that Agnes knows what's going on. Pierre Calio, who clarified that. Yeah, oh yeah, just what I said. Pierre says the radio is the explosion when Wanda's parents died. Stark Industries. Oh, that's interesting, and that might be it. I was wondering if it was like maybe just Captain America from the past he was hearing, or a voice along those lines. But it just sounds so much like him. And I looked up like Looper wrote an article about this, so take what it's worth. But Kat Dennings and I think it's BD Wong are both set to appear in the show as their MCU characters from before. So Kat Dennings being Darcy Lewis from the Thor movies, and oh, sorry, it's Randall Park, not that's borderline racist of me. Randall Park is Jimmy Woo from the Ant-Man movie. So That's a weird combination, but and some people think it's Jimmy Woo's voice, but unless I'm remembering it wrong, he kind of had a lower pitched voice, I feel, and doesn't really know Wanda, right? So I thought that was a strange voice if that's his voice. So we'll see. I have a hard time believing it's Captain America. I just am not sure who else it could be based on the voice. I could just be wrong, and like I said, the radio makes it really hard to tell. But it just Chris Evans has such a distinct voice. Most of the other male actors across the MCU register lower and have less of a nasal voice. So it's really just Chris Evans because Tom Holland sounds completely. Those are the two more higher pitched men among the group, and it doesn't really sound like Winter Soldier or anything like that. Because, like I said, like Sebastian Shaw, Randall Park, as far as I remember, like they all pitch a little lower than that. But again, radio could really throw me off like that, so I don't know. The radio thing and the connection with Stark Industries is interesting. Punkface Killer says, I'm gonna go back and rewatch Infinity War. Last I remember, Vision was dead. Oh, he is. He was. He also, if you notice, when he's outside of his like human disguise, he has apparently the soul gem in his forehead. I don't know what's going on. Like I don't. Something's up. I don't necessarily think they're in the MCU reality at the moment, and they're in some sort of pocket existence where the rules of our world don't matter. And that's kind of evoked in the first episode when Vision's looking around his workplace and he's asking his coworker, like, so what do we do? And they're like, we do forms. And at one point he asks his boss, like, well, what do the forms mean? And it's like, oh, well, they express their input and output. And no one says, like, what their business is. These are things that have been done before in the world of fiction elsewhere. It's just really interesting seeing that sort of stuff applied to the worlds of the MCU, and it's also kind of put together in a way that like all these components exist elsewhere, but it's never been put together in this unique form before. So quite cool. Pierre also says the watch Strucker is the origin of her power. See, that's kind of interesting. He's describing in the first one they do a little ad for Stark Industries, and the second one it's a little ad for Strucker watch. I really didn't think the ads meant anything. I thought they were just random little like transitions between like the first two chunks of like the first half and the second half of each episode. That's a more interesting theory you have there. Face Killer says, I want Quicksilver to come back. Well, like I said, it's very interesting Evan Peters appears. I don't know if the other Quicksilver appears. I don't know if that's confirmed. I just remember reading that in like Evan Peters either Wikipedia or IMDb. I thought that was fascinating. True. I think it's true. Let's see. I think that'd just be such a cool choice if it is. So clever. It's like, oh, here's your alternate universe, brother. Like, where's he gonna fit in all of this? Is he gonna be Quicksilver? I'm so curious. And Evan Peters is a hell of an actor that can do a lot more than just what we've seen in Quicksilver. Watch American Horror Story, you know. Chords in the way. Pierce says, I think it's an alternate reality in which Wanda hides herself to recover from the death of Vision. Or tries to save her as her reality is threatening the MCU reality. See, I thought that when the color happened, I thought it'd be really cool to cut back to the world watching her and it's in black and white. Like the television world stole the world's color. That didn't happen. So I'm not sure. It would be cool if it would be Sword, because Sword is like the first step in kind of introducing stuff with the rest of X-Men. I wouldn't think so, but that would also provide a connection to Monica Rambeau. So, but then I don't know what the connection is to the Thor and Ant-Man characters. But as I've said kind of throughout this review, I told my friend before watching these episodes, I have no idea what's going to happen. And I maintain that we have a better sense of the trajectory of the show. And I am so impressed by Disney for really just committing to the idea of like, this is a sitcom. Like, not even really a sitcom, but just like this weird take on it. And that is the show. And the amount that has of dedication in that direction, I think is so cool. There's really something to it. Not what I expected, but I think that's the crux of the show. and the broader MCU stuff, I really don't think it's going to be this huge thing setting up the future of Marvel, because that's not really their style. Usually it's just like, oh, we'll get a little hint of stuff to come. I could be wrong. I'm really just guessing here. I'm not going by like, oh, I'm taking off my reviewer brain at this point and just treating this as a fan. But like usually the way it goes is like all of this bigger stuff with the sword, well, and potentially either aim or whatever they're doing. Maybe it is just these agents trying to intervene, save her from Agnes, whoever they are, and like I really think that's all going to be relatively self-contained miniseries with like a few hints of stuff to come. That's more of the MCU style. So that's why I'm a little more skeptical. Like Marcel is saying, oh, they're teasing Spider Verse at the end. I'll have to go back and look at the screens that he's talking about, like the sword ones, because that's more focused on the center of the screen at the time. But I am a little more skeptical of stuff like that beyond them either being little Easter eggs or you know, genuine little hints of stuff to come, but not necessarily the crux of the show. So again, I do want to stress, like, I'm really just guessing there based on the past patterns of the MCU. That being said, we're in new territory now. I feel like as much as I'm having trouble pegging the voice as anything other than Captain America, I really don't think we expect a lot more out of Chris Evans or Robert Downey Jr., though who knows. And we are going to kind of be moving towards New Avengers, the Fantastic Four apparently, as well as the X-Men. So anyways, Try 3 says it's like Bewitched. It's honestly one of the first things I said about this show if you go to the top of this review. It reminds me so much of that, and I found it so charming. And then the sinister little like creepy undertones around it just make it a very interesting show so far. I don't know if we're going to review every single episode, but maybe I'll check in every once in a while with it. But I thought it'd be worth talking about, and a lot of people were asking about it in last week's stream. So figured we'd kick things off with that. But tomorrow we're going to take a couple weeks back, and well, a few weeks now. And I finally got around to seeing Wonder Woman 1984. So we're going to do a prolonged review. But I'm actually very glad I waited to do that just by circumstance and not wanting to pay $30 for it, which you have to do in Canada, to watching the Wonder Woman movie until after I'd seen Wonder Woman already, but I'm very glad that that I'm not reviewing it until after these 2 episodes of WandaVision came out, because the contrast between this review, where I'm really excited about the show and love it, and my feelings about Wonder Woman are going to be I didn't hate Wonder Woman before we get any funny ideas, but there's a lot to talk about, put it that way, and it's just going to be so different than this conversation today. But I feel like I've run out of stuff to say. We've gone longer than like either of the 2 episodes, really, and I talked about how much I liked how short and succinct they were. So on that note, I think it is worth ending things. Until next time, guys. Thanks for watching. Try 3. Saying that movie is a miss, to be honest. Referring to Wonder Woman. I hope you can join me for next review, as you might find I don't I'm kind of with you there. I'll say that right now, because so much more to talk about. But broadly speaking, Wonder Woman, as much as this show, I'll say this because it has to do with WandaVision. As much as this show impressed me, Wonder Woman kind of disappointed me. A big up and down in that regard. But we'll see you guys tomorrow for that. I think it's the same time we'll start at 6:30. Chaitri says, take it easy, Will, if near your phone. Well, you know, you don't have to come. I just was saying it'll be cool if you can join us and follow up on that opinion you just mentioned, because I sure we share a lot. But there's also parts of that movie I love. It'll be an interesting either way. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time here on Comic Island.